In every corner of the world there are stories we don't see, heroes we don't notice. Meet Pop Mays, an elderly janitor, blending into the background of a Montgomery police station. But beneath that worn uniform lies a past that could change everything. What happens when the man everyone overlooks is the only one who can save them? Pop Mays isn't just a janitor. He's a former Special Forces commander, and he's about to show the world that true strength is never forgotten. Welcome to the world of echoes in the halls. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode of gripping tales like this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the story. Drop a comment below and let us know. What do you think is hidden in Pop Mays' past? Can you guess what happens next? In the quiet halls of a Montgomery police station, an elderly janitor named Pop Mays moves through each shift unnoticed by the officers he serves. With a mop in his hand and silence as his shield, most see him as just another face in the background. But when a sinister plot threatens the lives within the precinct, a newly appointed commissioner recognizes the man behind the uniform, not as a janitor but as the former Special Forces commander who once saved his life. As shadows close in and loyalties fracture, the unlikeliest of heroes steps forward. What follows is a gripping tale of hidden pasts, buried codes, and a silent guardian who never stopped watching. In a world where appearances deceive and history never stays buried, one man's quiet presence becomes the last line of defense. Echoes in the Halls is a story about duty, redemption, and the strength that never fades, even when the world forgets your name. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Elias Mays pushed his mop across the scuffed tile floors of the Montgomery Police Department. The night shift was always quiet, just the low murmur of dispatch radios and the occasional echo of boots in the hall. He preferred it that way. Solitude was a familiar friend. At 73 years old, Pop, as everyone called him, had been working as the station janitor for over a decade. He never spoke much, just offered a polite nod and a soft evening whenever an officer passed by. He knew which vending machines were always jammed, which toilets leaked, and which lights flickered no matter how many times they were replaced. He remembered the names of the rookies who came and went even if they never remembered his. To most of the young officers, Pop was just part of the background, a relic who wandered the halls like an old ghost with a mop and a slow shuffle. Some joked about him behind his back. Others didn't bother acknowledging him at all. He didn't mind. He was used to being underestimated. That night, as the shift changed and officers poured in and out of the building, Pop continued his routine. He moved through the locker rooms, the holding area, the briefing room, wiping down surfaces and emptying bins without a word. His joints ached with every step, his left knee stiff from an old wound that had never fully healed. Still, he worked with quiet purpose, every movement methodical. In the briefing room, a young officer named Cody Masters leaned back in his chair and chuckled as Pop passed by. "Hey Pop," Cody said, "you miss a spot." Pop glanced at the table. It was spotless. He gave Cody a nod, not breaking stride. "You sure you ain't got night vision in them old man eyes?" Cody said with a smirk. Pop stopped, looked at the table again, then slowly wiped it one more time, never speaking a word. Cody laughed and turned back to his notes, already forgetting the moment. As the station settled into its overnight rhythm, Pop made his way to the back offices. The older detectives had all gone home. Only the young bucks remained, scrolling their phones or half watching the security feeds. Then the front doors opened. There was a shift in the atmosphere, subtle but immediate. Officers stood straighter, conversations halted, and eyes turned toward the entrance. A tall man in a charcoal gray suit walked in, flanked by two aides in plain clothes. His shoulders were square, his presence commanding, his eyes sharp and alert. This was the new commissioner, Colton Reese. He had taken over the department after months of turmoil and scandal. Some welcomed the change. Others resented the outsider. But none could deny that he carried himself like a man who had seen more than city crime scenes and political meetings. Reese was being given a tour by Deputy Chief Harmon, who spoke with the pride of a man trying to impress. "And down here," Harmon said, gesturing, "is the main operations floor. Most of our day-to-day coordination happens here. We'll show you the live feeds and—" Reese held up a hand. His eyes had drifted down the hallway to where Pop stood, holding his mop. Time seemed to slow. The commissioner took a step forward. Then another. Officers looked around, confused, whispering. Pop didn't move. He stood tall, mop in hand, expression unreadable. Reese came to a stop 3 feet from him. He brought his heels together, straightened his spine, and saluted. The hallway fell silent. Pop looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he gave a single nod. Deputy Chief Harmon blinked. "Sir?" Reese let the salute fall. He turned slightly to the gathered officers. "Gentlemen," he said, "this man is Elias Mays." Some glanced at each other. A few shrugged. Reese's voice lowered. "I owe my life to him." No one laughed. Pop said nothing. He turned and resumed mopping the floor as if nothing had happened. But from that moment on, no one in that building saw him the same way again. The morning after the commissioner's salute, the station was buzzing. The silence that had followed the encounter turned into whispers, and those whispers quickly became theories. Some thought Reese was mistaken. Others guessed that Pop had once been a soldier, maybe even a war hero. But no one could confirm anything. Pop never spoke of his past, and his personnel file had little more than a name, an address, and a start date. Cody Masters, now more curious than dismissive, asked around. The older officers shrugged. The brass gave vague answers. But something had changed in the air. No one joked about Pop anymore. Pop continued his rounds like nothing had happened. He arrived early, left late, always moving through the halls with that slow, steady rhythm. But something about his posture had shifted ever so slightly. There was an alertness in his eyes, a quiet scanning of corners and exits that hadn't been there before. Down in the evidence room, Pop replaced a broken light. The room was lined with shelves holding bagged contraband, weapons, cash, and items tagged and sealed. As he stood on the small ladder, he paused. One of the evidence lockers had been left ajar. He climbed down and inspected the lock. There was no visible damage, but something about the placement of the pad seemed off. Not wrong, just different. Too perfect. He closed the locker and noted the number. 38. That evening, Commissioner Reese stayed late in his office. His aide, Evans, was reviewing department protocols when Pop walked in without knocking, carrying a fresh pot of coffee. Reese looked up and nodded, offering a quiet smile. Still making the best coffee in the building. Pop poured a cup, set it on the desk, and turned to leave. "You always had a way of showing up before something went wrong," Reese said, his voice soft, almost nostalgic. Pop paused. "You remember the sandstorm?" the commissioner added, eyes distant now. Pop looked back, his voice low and worn. "Bamako. Northern Edge." Reese nodded slowly. "You pulled me out from under a collapsed wall. Took out 4 tangos with a broken wrist." Pop glanced at Evans, who was staring. Reese gave a faint grin. "Evans, you ever hear of Operation Harrow?" Evans shook his head. "No, sir. That one's not in any of the files I've read." "It wouldn't be," Reese replied. "It never happened. And if it had, the man who led it was standing right here." Pop said nothing. Just gave a half shrug. Reese leaned forward. "They called him Ghost 6. Evans blinked. "Wait, Ghost 6 is real." Pop turned to leave. Reese stopped him with a question. "Why here? Why come back to Montgomery? After everything?" Pop didn't turn around. "Home's where the dust settles." Later that week, Pop walked the perimeter of the station. The back gate had a new camera, one that wasn't on the official upgrade schedule. He made a mental note. Down in the motor pool, he spotted a van with no department tags. Inside the van, through a dusty windshield, he saw a tactical bag on the front seat. Military issue. Modified. Not standard police equipment. Something wasn't right. Meanwhile, Reese was beginning to uncover strange gaps in the department systems. Files missing. Case reports altered. Budget requests rerouted. He suspected someone on the inside was covering tracks. It was no longer just about improving morale. This was something deeper. That night, as Pop mopped the hallway outside the holding cells, he saw a young man being brought in. Hispanic, mid-20s, with bruises on his face and blood on his knuckles. The arresting officer muttered something about gang activity and said the kid had been caught trespassing near the evidence room. Pop locked eyes with the young man. For a split second, recognition flickered. Not from Pop, but from the prisoner. The kid looked shaken, not by the arrest, but by the sight of the janitor. Pop said nothing. He continued down the hall, pushing his mop as if the world had not begun to shift around him. But in his mind, old instincts were awakening. The kind honed in foreign deserts under moonless skies. He knew patterns. He knew deception. And more than anything, he knew when a quiet war was about to begin. The air in the Montgomery Police Department had grown heavier. Not with noise or action, but with a feeling that something was being quietly rearranged beneath the surface. Officers whispered more. Some walked in pairs when they used to go alone. Others stared a little longer at dark corners and closed doors. Pop Mays moved among them with his usual rhythm, pushing his cart down the hallway, keys jangling softly at his hip. But now each key had been tested again. Every room he entered, he swept not only with his mop but with his eyes. That morning, he visited the evidence locker again, pretending to polish the metal handles as he double-checked the lock on number 38. Still sealed. Still clean. But something inside gnawed at him. He could sense tampering in the same way a predator senses another's territory. Invisible signs. Slight changes in the dust. The scent of control. Later that day, Officer Cody Masters was pulling files in the report room when Pop walked in to clean the vents. "You hear about the van?" Cody asked, trying to sound casual. Pop glanced up. "Unmarked," Cody continued. "Found it parked behind the municipal lot. No plates. No report in the system. Guy at the desk says it was checked in by someone from admin, but nobody's owned up to it." Pop climbed the small stepladder and unscrewed the vent grate. He said nothing. Just listened. Cody scratched his head. "You think we're being watched?" Pop finished the vent, climbed down, and said softly, "Always." Cody laughed nervously but kept his eyes on Pop, the humor fading. That evening, Pop slipped into the old archives room, a space most officers avoided. It smelled of mildew and forgotten stories. Stacks of boxes leaned against one another like old men asleep in a pew. Pop walked the aisles with a flashlight, stopping at a shelf near the back. He found what he was looking for, a small, tan envelope marked with a handwritten case number. He opened it, flipping through photos and incident reports from 7 years ago. The faces were familiar. Young. Ardent. Many had trained. One in particular stood out, Logan Crane. Pop had pulled him out of a convoy fire in Kandahar. Crane had disappeared after discharge. Rumors swirled that he'd gone into private security. Some said mercenary work. Others believed he was dead. The last entry in the folder linked Crane to a string of robberies involving ex-military contractors. Always just out of reach. Always ahead of the investigators. Until a tip had come through 2 weeks ago. Pop looked again at the photograph of the man arrested near the evidence room. The bruised young man with the hollow stare. He wasn't part of a gang. He was a courier. Someone had sent him in. Pop closed the file. The gears were turning. The following morning, Commissioner Reese sat in his office surrounded by unopened memos and flagged messages from Internal Affairs. His face was drawn, eyes red from another sleepless night. He rubbed his temple and looked up as Pop entered with the morning pot of coffee. "I have a name," Reese said without greeting. "Logan Crane." Pop poured the coffee, his hand steady. "You trained him, didn't you?" Pop gave a slight nod. Reese leaned forward. "Why would he target this department?" Pop looked out the window. The blinds were closed, but the instinct remained. "He wants something buried here. Something no one else knows we have." Reese sat back. "Like what?" "Something tied to what we did," Pop answered. "Before the papers. Before the medals. Before they cut us loose." Reese thought for a moment, then walked to his file cabinet. He unlocked a drawer and pulled out a folder marked only with a red dot. Inside were black and white satellite photos, troop logs, and hand-drawn maps. He laid them across the desk. Operation Harrow. Pop recognized the markings. A rural compound in Nigeria. Burned to the ground. Officially, it had never existed. But Pop remembered the warehouse beneath the compound. Remembered the crates of stolen munitions, foreign tech, and one black box wrapped in a dense lead casing. That casing had been sent back to a facility in Alabama. The officers at the time had been told it was evidence. Now that evidence was in Locker 38. And someone was coming for it. That night, as the station quieted, Pop sat alone in the staff lounge. He cleaned a coffee machine with slow, circular motions, eyes locked on the television playing muted news in the background. Footage from a break-in at a city warehouse. The van from the municipal lot, now torched. And a shadowy figure captured in the grainy surveillance feed. Pop stepped closer. The silhouette was unmistakable. Crane had arrived in Montgomery. The city of Montgomery pressed on under the weight of heat and routine. Downtown, storefronts opened for business and patrol cars rolled down cracked streets. But inside the police department, things had shifted. Fear wasn't out in the open, but it curled beneath the surface like smoke from an unseen fire. Pop Mays didn't change his routine. He still swept the corners, mopped the floors, fixed the overhead lights. But his pace had grown slower, more deliberate. His path through the building seemed random to the untrained eye, but it was anything but. He was watching. He was listening. And more than anything, he was remembering. Pop entered the squad room as the morning briefing wrapped. Officers filed out, talking about routine calls, a stolen car, a domestic dispute. At the end of the room sat Reese, notepad in hand, eyes unfocused. When the room emptied, Pop sat down across from him. No words passed between them. Reese slid the notepad across the table. A list of names. Officers, staff, civilian contractors. Some were crossed out. A few had question marks beside them. Someone inside is feeding Crane information, Reese said quietly. He knew when the cameras would be down. He knew about the evidence room schedule. This isn't guesswork. Pop read through the names, his finger pausing on one. Frank Delaney, he said softly. Admin clerk. Military background. Transferred in last year. Clean record. Too clean, Pop muttered. That afternoon, Pop visited Delaney's office under the pretense of repairing a flickering light. The man was polite, reserved, a little too quick to offer help. His eyes moved like a man running numbers in the back of his mind. Pop changed the bulb. Returned 10 minutes later, pretending to have left his screwdriver behind. Delaney was gone. His computer screen still glowed. Pop moved fast. His hands didn't shake. Within 30 seconds, he had inserted a small flash drive from his tool belt and copied over the recent activity logs. Back in the janitor's closet, he loaded the contents onto an old laptop. The data was dense, wrapped in layers of encryption. But one folder stood out. It was simply titled Harrow. Inside were fragments of a shipping manifest, a security protocol, and a blurry image of Locker 38. At the bottom of the screen, a countdown timer blinked in red. 3 days. Pop leaned back against the wall, the weight of his past pressing in around him. This wasn't just about Crane. This was about what they had found in that black box all those years ago. He had tried to forget. They all had. But secrets never stayed buried. He closed the laptop. The next morning, Pop watched as Officer Cody Masters escorted Delaney to the break room. Cody offered him coffee. Delaney declined. Pop moved through the hallway, quiet as breath, and slipped into the empty admin office. He placed a listening device under the desk. Not high-tech. Old school. Analog. Untraceable. He left without a trace. That night, he returned to the janitor's closet, headphones in place. The feed crackled to life. Said it's locked down. Only Reese and Mays have keys. We'll need the codes. They won't give him up, a second voice said, gruff and impatient. We take them. 3 nights from now. Early morning. Before the sun. Pop removed the headphones. It was happening soon. He made a decision. The next day, Pop approached Reese in the hallway. We need to get ahead of them. Reese nodded. You want backup? No, Pop said. I want you to act like nothing's changed. That night, Pop went home for the first time in 2 days. His house was a modest brick structure on the south side, half covered by overgrown shrubs and shaded by an old oak tree. Inside, the walls were bare. No pictures. No memories. Just silence. He opened a closet and pulled down an old wooden box. Inside were relics of another life. A watch with a cracked face. A faded map with bloodstains in the margins. Dog tags. And a sidearm. He checked the chamber. Loaded fresh rounds. Cleaned it until the metal gleamed. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. A summer storm was brewing. Pop stood by the window and watched the rain begin to fall. He could feel it now. The ghosts were no longer in the past. They were coming. Montgomery lay heavy beneath a blanket of humid air and low clouds. The rain had passed, but its memory clung to every surface. Streets glistened. Trees wept slowly. And inside the police station, time moved with an unnatural stillness. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. Keys jangled less often. Even the radio chatter seemed subdued, officers speaking in clipped, wary tones. Something was about to happen, and though no one could say exactly what, everyone felt it. Pop Mays moved through the building with the precision of a man preparing a battlefield. He knew every door that stuck, every camera that flickered when the power surged. He knew where the blind spots were and where they had recently shifted. He knew the place better than the architects. Down in the lower hallway, he unlocked a small storage room most had forgotten existed. Inside, dust-blanketed rows of unused riot gear and battered office furniture. Pop brushed aside a folded tarp and uncovered a locked case embedded into the wall. From his pocket, he produced a key. Inside the case were 3 items: a tactical earpiece, a lightweight ballistic vest, and an envelope marked with Reese's handwriting. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 words written in black ink. I trust you. Pop exhaled through his nose. No smile. Just acknowledgement. He geared up slowly, methodically. The vest slid over his shoulders like an old memory. The earpiece buzzed to life once connected to the station's internal frequency. Static at first, then the gentle voice of Officer Cody Masters came through. "South entrance is clean. No movement in or out." Pop clicked his mic once. No reply needed. He moved to the stairwell, descending to the basement level beneath the evidence room. The walls narrowed. The air changed. It was colder here, untouched by the daily rhythms above. He stopped at a junction where two hallways met. To the left, the old boiler room. To the right, the access tunnel to the motor pool. He took the right path. At the end of the corridor, he crouched beside a wall vent and removed the grill with quiet care. From inside, he pulled a small black duffel, one he had placed there 3 years ago when he first took the janitor job. Just in case. Inside were tools he wasn't supposed to have. Lock override keys. A short-range motion jammer. Smoke capsules. Pop took only what he needed. Then he waited. Upstairs, Reese sat at his desk, every light off. He stared at the red second hand on the clock, watching it glide toward midnight. In the hallway outside, Delaney moved with purpose. He wore his department badge, but his expression was cold, practiced. He passed by the dispatch desk, nodded at the tired night sergeant, and made his way to the elevator. He wasn't alone. 2 men followed, dressed in civilian clothes, moving like they belonged. They didn't. The elevator doors closed. Cody's voice came over Pop's earpiece. 3 bogies. Basement access. East elevator. All armed. No radio comms. Pop moved. He stepped silently past the junction and disappeared into shadow just before the elevator doors opened. Delaney stepped out first. The other 2 fanned out. One carried a suppressed sidearm. The other held a device shaped like a crowbar, but made from polished carbon steel, a thermal breaching tool. They advanced toward the evidence room. Pop stayed behind the generator housing until they passed. He moved low and close to the wall, shadow to shadow, until he was behind them. Then he stood. The first man sensed him and spun, weapon rising. Too slow. Pop struck the man's wrist with the edge of his palm, disarming him in one clean motion. Before the second attacker could react, Pop had dropped low, swept the legs out from under him, and silenced his cry with a sharp elbow to the throat. Delaney turned just in time to see Pop level the confiscated pistol at his chest. "You picked the wrong station," Pop said calmly. Delaney's mouth moved, but no words came out. Pop reached forward, pulled the comm from his ear, and pressed the signal button. One click. A moment later, Reese's voice came through on the line. "Secure?" Pop nodded to no one in particular. "For now." Cody and 2 officers arrived moments later, weapons drawn, faces pale with surprise as they saw the 3 bodies on the floor. 2 unconscious, 1 barely breathing. Cody looked at Pop, then at the weapon in his hand, then at the vest under his janitor's shirt. "You're not just some war hero, are you?" Pop met his gaze. "I clean up messes." They moved Delaney and the others to holding cells under lock and key, no paperwork, no chatter. Just silence. Later, Pop returned to the evidence room. Locker 38 stood untouched, but now Reese stood beside it, holding a new padlock. Pop looked at him. "We move it," Pop said. "Tonight." Reese nodded. "You have a place?" Pop turned, already walking away. "I always have a place." The station was quieter than usual the next morning. Officers moved with subdued urgency, unsure of the strange energy hanging in the air but smart enough not to question it out loud. Word hadn't spread about the previous night's breach. Reese had kept it off the books. No reports. No paperwork. Only a few trusted officers knew what had gone down, and none of them were talking. Pop arrived early, dressed in his janitor's coveralls as always. But beneath them, the vest still hugged his ribs, and the sidearm rested in the small of his back. His posture was more upright now and his eyes sharper. The pretense of age and slowness had fallen away like dead skin. He made his way through the hall with a sense of calm purpose, stopping once to glance out a small window. Across the street, an unmarked car sat idle. Same vehicle that had followed him 2 nights before. Same small dent above the front fender. Crane was here. Pop continued toward the lower levels, where Reese waited in a utility room that was never listed on the blueprints. Inside, Locker 38 had been wheeled in on a dolly. The casing around it was thick, reinforced, sealed with 2 biometric locks, one tied to Reese, the other to Pop. Reese stood with his arms crossed, the tension in his face showing through despite his calm demeanor. "We got the location secure. About 3 hours out, near Selma. Old decommissioned silo on state land. Still has power. Still sealed." Pop nodded. "Crane knows the roads. He'll try to intercept us en route." We'll need a decoy. Pop stepped aside, revealing Cody, already dressed in civilian clothes. Me and Cody take the real package, Pop said. You and the others run the decoy north, like it's headed to Huntsville. Let them follow noise while we go quiet. Reese hesitated. You trust him? I trust his eyes, Pop said. They still look for the right things. Reese gave a nod and walked out, leaving the two men alone. Cody let out a low breath. I didn't sign up for this. Pop looked at him. Neither did I. But here we are. They left just after dusk. No sirens. No escorts. Just a plain white van with government plates, loaded with what nobody was supposed to remember, heading west along Route 80. The air was thick with humidity and threat. Trees leaned in over the road like sentinels. The silence inside the van was heavy, broken only by the hum of the tires and the occasional crackle of static on the radio. Pop sat in the passenger seat, his eyes always scanning, his left hand resting on a duffel bag between his boots. Cody gripped the wheel tighter as they reached the long stretch of farmland west of the city. You think Crane knows we're out here? Pop stared out the window. I think he never stopped watching. At the 2-hour mark, they pulled off the road onto a narrow dirt path, rutted and overgrown. The old silo rose up at the end of it, a black shadow against the pale dusk. Vines clung to its side. The steel door at its base was rusted but intact. Pop and Cody parked the van behind a thicket of trees. They didn't speak, just moved with practiced economy, hauling Locker 38 on a collapsible dolly down a gravel slope toward the hidden door. Cody keyed in the passcode Reese had provided. The door groaned open. They rolled the locker inside. It was colder than they expected. The interior had been used for storage decades ago. Dust hung in the air like fog. Mice scurried between rusted boxes. A single fluorescent light buzzed above them. It was enough. Pop secured the locker to the concrete floor with steel clamps. Then he took a breath and opened it. Inside was a small lead-lined case. Black, seamless, about the size of a carry-on suitcase. Cody leaned forward. That's it. Pop didn't answer. He just closed the locker again and locked it tight. Outside, the wind had stopped. Then the silence broke. A twig snapped. Pop and Cody exchanged glances. Pop spoke into his radio. We've been made. Static. Then Reese's voice. We've got movement up north. Looks like Crane took the bait. Convoy's turning back to cut him off. Pop shook his head. He's already here. Cody moved toward the silo door to check the lock. A shot rang out, striking the metal just inches from his hand. Pop pulled him back. He's not alone. From the tree-lean, figures moved. 5. Armed. Fast. Crane's team. Pop reached into the duffel, pulled out 2 compact weapons and a pouch of smoke capsules. He tossed one to Cody. You remember your training? I trained at the academy, Cody said, swallowing. Pop nodded. Good. This is the real kind. He pulled the pin on a smoke capsule and rolled it toward the door just as the first figures breached the threshold. A wall of thick gray mist exploded outward, buying them seconds. Then it began. Short bursts of gunfire. Flashes of movement. Pop moved like liquid, precise and unrelenting. Every shot counted. Every step had purpose. He guided Cody behind a stack of crates, then drew the fire away with a flanking maneuver. One intruder dropped. Then another. But the third made it close. A blade shimmered in his hand. Pop caught the man's wrist and drove his knee into the attacker's chest. The blade fell. The smoke cleared slightly. Crane stood in the center of the room, unarmed but not unready. His eyes found Pop across the concrete floor. You shouldn't have opened that locker again, he said. Pop raised his weapon. And you should have stayed buried. They charged. The clash was brutal. Old hands, old grudges. Crane was faster, but Pop had memory on his side. Every move the man made, Pop had seen before. Trained into him. Crafted by him. Crane swung wide. Pop stepped in, caught his elbow, and drove him to the ground with a final, crushing blow to the throat. Crane lay gasping, stunned but alive. Cody stepped forward, weapon raised, breathing hard. Pop turned to him. Secure the others. Call it in. Cody hesitated, then nodded and disappeared up the stairs. Pop looked down at Crane. You were a soldier once. Crane coughed. Still am. Pop shook his head. No. You're just a man who forgot what side he was on. And with that, he turned away, walked toward the locker, and sat beside it on the cold concrete. Outside, the first flash of blue and red lights cut through the trees. The storm was over. But dawn had not yet come. The sun had not yet broken over Montgomery when the first of the patrol cars rolled back into the station lot. Their headlights cut through the pale morning fog, casting long beams across the damp pavement. Inside the building, the lights were dim, the coffee barely hot, and the air unusually quiet for that hour. Reese stood near the rear loading bay, arms folded, watching as officers secured the remaining pieces from the night's operation. Locker 38, sealed and wrapped, was wheeled into a locked basement vault that hadn't been used in years. No reports would be filed. No press releases given. Just shadows returning to shadows. Crane had been taken into federal custody. His men were split between county and state detainment. All of them silent. All of them looking at Pop with the recognition reserved only for men who had once commanded their fear. Pop Mays arrived back at the station just before 7. No fanfare. No escort. He walked through the front doors with a mop in one hand and a battered satchel slung over his shoulder. The officers in the squad room paused, some halfway through their morning routines. For a moment, everything went still. Then, slowly, one by one, they stood. It wasn't loud. No one saluted. No applause. But the silence was its own kind of reverence. Pop passed through them like a current of something older than pride. Reese met him near the elevator. "We put it where it belongs." Pop gave a small nod. "You did good. You sure you don't want to debrief? The brass are going to want something." "They can want," Pop said. He pressed the elevator button and waited. Before the doors opened, Reese turned toward him. "You saved my life again." Pop didn't smile. "Next time, try not needing it." He stepped into the elevator and disappeared down the shaft. The janitor's closet was as he left it. Simple. Clean. Unchanged. He placed the mop back in the corner, sat down on the folding chair and opened the satchel. Inside was a black notebook. 1. Pages yellowing at the edges. He flipped through it until he reached a page marked only with a line. Underneath, he wrote 3 names. The ones from last night. Then he closed the book and leaned back in the chair. His breathing was steady. Eyes closed. Not sleeping. Just waiting. Outside, the station resumed its rhythm. Phones rang. Reports were filed. Radios squawked with half-garbled dispatches. New cases. Old crimes. The city pressed on. But within those halls, something had changed. Word of what had happened, or rather what had almost happened, moved slowly like a whisper from one ear to another. Some said it was a drill. Others claimed it was a classified sting. Nobody had the full picture. Nobody would. But everyone now watched Pop differently. Not with suspicion. Not even with awe. But with a quiet, enduring respect that didn't need explanation. That afternoon, as a new wave of officers arrived for the evening shift, one of the rookies approached Reese in the hallway. "Hey, that janitor. Is it true?" Reese didn't look up from his clipboard. "Depends on what you heard. They say he used to be someone. Like serious military. Special something." Reese finally looked up, his gaze flat and unreadable. "He still is." The rookie blinked. "What do you mean?" Reese walked away without answering. In the janitor's closet, Pop stood up. He pulled on his gloves, grabbed the mop, and headed out into the halls. There was work to be done. Dust in the corners. Dirt on the tiles. Voices to listen to. Shadows to keep watch over. Because men like Pop Mays didn't get retirement. They got purpose. And for some, that was enough. The end. Here are 7 moral lessons drawn from this story. Moral lesson 1. True value often goes unseen. In a world obsessed with status and surface impressions, Pop Mays stood as a quiet reminder that real power doesn't always announce itself. He was dismissed by most as just the janitor, a background figure invisible unless needed. The younger officers overlooked him, unaware of the depth behind the worn uniform and quiet eyes. This is the story of how society too often underestimates people based on job titles, age, or silence. But behind those assumptions can live a history richer than medals or press conferences could ever show. Pop had served his country at the highest level. He had made life and death decisions, commanded teams, and survived darkness most men could not imagine. And yet, he swept the floors with the same diligence he once led missions. Not because he had fallen from greatness, but because he understood that purpose isn't defined by how visible you are, it's defined by the integrity with which you serve. Too often we miss the wisdom sitting quietly beside us. The elderly neighbor, the factory worker, the quiet man at the bus stop. But greatness wears many faces, and when you judge by the cover, you forfeit the chance to learn what's written within. Moral lesson 2. Leadership is measured in actions, not titles. Commissioner Reese wore the title, but Pop carried the weight. In the hour of crisis, when men broke through the walls of duty and principle, it was not the badge that rose to defend the station. It was the quiet leader in Janitor's coveralls. Leadership is not about commanding from above, it's about rising to meet responsibility when no one else will. Pop never boasted. He never reminded anyone of who he used to be. He let his presence speak for him. When the younger officers faltered or feared, it was his steady voice that gave them purpose. When danger crept into the building, it was his mind, not just his muscle, that kept them safe. Too many chase titles, hoping the nameplate will carry their worth. But leadership is proven, not proclaimed. It is earned through action, sacrifice, and the courage to do what is necessary even when it costs you something. Especially when it does. Moral lesson 3. The past never truly leaves us. Pop tried to leave his old life behind. He folded his past like an old uniform and tucked it away. But even as he scrubbed floors and polished handrails, the echoes of the battlefield still moved through him. The habits, the awareness, the wounds, what we carry inside never fully disappears. Time may blur the edges, but the past is not a place we can simply walk away from, especially when it was forged in fire. Pop's story shows us that healing is not about forgetting. It's about making peace with what shaped us, using it not as a burden but as a tool. His past made him who he was, and when the moment demanded it, he didn't reject it. He embraced it with quiet courage. In life, we all carry chapters we wish were different. But those chapters contain the tools we need for tomorrow. We don't escape the past. We transform it into wisdom, into strength, into purpose. Moral lesson 4. Integrity requires sacrifice. Pop could have walked away. He could have let others deal with the coming storm, claiming retirement or distance. But integrity doesn't retreat when no one is watching. It steps forward even when there's no reward waiting at the end. In returning to the fray, not for glory but to protect the very people who once dismissed him, Pop embodied what it means to live by a code. He risked everything for a building full of people who thought he was just the guy with the mop. That kind of sacrifice is the purest form of honor. Doing the right thing is rarely easy. It is almost never convenient. It demands that we put aside ego, comfort, and sometimes even safety. But the path of integrity leaves a light behind it. A trail others can follow even when you're no longer there. Moral lesson 5. Redemption is possible but not guaranteed. Crane was once a soldier just like Pop, trained in the same school, sharpened by the same code. But somewhere along the way he lost sight of what the fight was for. He became a man ruled by greed, vengeance, and shadows. His story reminds us that we all start from the same choices, but the road we walk is determined by what we hold sacred. Crane could have returned from the darkness, but instead, he doubled down. He let resentment guide his path. And when the final moment came, he found himself staring up at the man who had once been his brother in arms, and now stood as his reckoning. Redemption is never out of reach. But it demands honesty. It demands humility. And it demands that we stop running from the mirror. Crane had the chance to change. He chose not to. Pop chose differently. Moral lesson 6. Legacy is built in silence. Pop will not be written about in newspapers. There will be no plaques or statues in the park. But for those who were there, for the officers who stood in that hallway, for the commissioner who owed his life to him, for Cody who saw real courage for the first time, Pop's legacy is carved into the stone of their lives. He didn't chase applause. He chased clarity. He did his job, kept his promises, and protected what mattered. And in doing so, he left behind something stronger than fame. He left behind an example. Legacy is not what we claim. It's what we leave behind in the hearts of others. Quiet deeds, right choices, moments when we didn't flinch. In the end, those are the things that echo through the halls. Moral lesson 7. Purpose has no expiration date. Pop Mays was well beyond retirement age. He could have been fishing, resting, fading quietly into the background. But he understood something most don't. Purpose doesn't come with an age limit. So many believe that once youth is gone, usefulness goes with it. But that's a lie told by those who have forgotten what purpose really means. Pop had more to give, not in speed, not in strength, but in wisdom, in clarity, in presence. He didn't cling to the past. He used it to shape the present. The story of Pop Mays is a reminder that no matter how old you are, you still matter. You still have something to give. Whether it's a lesson, a stand, a single choice made at the right time, it counts. Purpose doesn't retire. It adapts. It endures. And if you are still breathing, then there is still something left to do. Disclaimer. This story is entirely fictional and created for entertainment purposes. The characters, events, and settings depicted are the product of imagination and are not based on real-life individuals or occurrences. While the narrative is crafted to provide moral lessons, motivation, and inspiration, any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. The themes explored in this story aim to inspire thought, reflection, and personal growth. Viewers are encouraged to approach the content with an open mind and consider the valuable lessons of courage, integrity, leadership, and redemption shared through the story. And so, the story of Pop Mays comes to an end, but the lessons he leaves behind are far from over. True strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers in the background, waiting for the moment it's needed most. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more inspirational tales and thought-provoking lessons. We have many more stories coming your way, and we'd love for you to be a part of our community. Dive into our other videos where we explore themes of leadership, redemption, and personal growth. Also, leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. What lesson did you take away from Pop's journey? Until next time, keep seeking inspiration and never underestimate the quiet heroes around you.